Everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to be going over again a little bit more of the apologetics at work, asking people at my job just the conversations and dialogues that went from me asking them, do you believe in God and what do you think of Christ? They both point toward that direction, and I would tailor it per the person because I already had a relationship with a lot of these people. I knew their names, and so I just went around, and it was during a time I was going to teach an apologetics course for a church. So I was genuinely interested, and I did want to know, and this kind of gave me a great excuse to go through the whole warehouse and just, ask them what they thought. So last time we went over, I tried it, doesn't work, and it's all myth and counter to science. So I think we'll stick with the theme of 2 questions per session, because I don't want these to be too terribly long. For my own sake, we are all scarce on time. That's just the way things are. But also, these are supposed to be more of a conversational format. So to give you ideas of how to use your own skill set and try to appeal to other people's strengths and weaknesses. And I'm not saying I'm super good or profound at doing this. You can't argue people into the kingdom. But I have had practice talking with people, I guess you could say it that way. And bringing up faith matters legitimately for the other person's benefit are very important. It's the thing we are commissioned to do as a church, as a follower of Christ, per se. So the first one, it goes something like this. I can't accept God hated homosexuals. Or God hating homosexuals. And I'm like, alright, I can understand that. So we have to define our terms. Hate is quite a strong word, and Christ used the word hate a couple of times, specifically when he says later on in the Gospels, he says, you must hate your brother and your father and your mother. You must have such a love for me, then you must hate them. Now that seems really harsh as well. Really? Hate? Well, maybe not, but maybe so, because the comparison between aiming toward the transcendent, what is ultimately good for everything, and the other things that might hold on to you and pull you back, in order to aim for one, you got to make sure you're not clinging on to the other. So that's the first part of it. Because if we're going to get to what God hates and God detests, obviously we are all sinners, and God is going to mark every one of us as guilty, not perfect. The end. But that answer doesn't sit well with me, and I'm sure it doesn't sit well with you either. The other thing I said was, okay, we have to look at 2 books. You have the book of Scripture, and you have the book of the law. And this borders on pragmatism, so we have to be careful with this one. What does it take to make a child? What does it take for conscious life to continue? Well, it takes a man and a woman, right? Last I checked, they are playing in science a little bit where you can grow meat, etc. in test tubes. That's kind of weird, and that's not natural. Outside of this giant utopian paradigm, which mankind, I guess, wants to create himself eventually, that's just not going to happen. The way things are set in place is it takes male and female to keep going with the species. Now, Carl Trueman wrote a book called The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self, and it shows the point where culture split, specifically in the mainstream, the non-religious, where it's kind of a combination of Rousseau, and you have the Marquis de Sade, and you have Freud saying, you are only your sexuality. Follow your urges. Your urge, whatever urge you have, follow your heart. That's the strongest thing you have in you. Well, that's terrible advice, because how many people have made really good decisions when under the influence of lust and anger and drunkenness and envy? Usually when these things hit you and you follow them, bad things happen after, not good things, not good structured things, and then you regret them later because you follow the impulse of the immediate. So this is something that I can wrap my head around, but I can't understand it because I don't live it. Now, understanding as to know to understand, because I obviously am married and I have kids, so this is not something that I have to struggle with. But when we look at how existence is written, and then the next question be okay, well, if existence is supposed to be that way, why am I attracted to somebody of the same gender? I don't have an answer to that, but I know why I don't have an answer to that. It's the same answer that Job was given when he wanted an audience with God. God basically said, where were you when I made everything? How do you know what was involved with the creation of existence itself in order for things to be? Now, Job had no answer for him. And that also goes to the question of evil. Why does evil exist? Well, sometimes light needs a shadow. Maybe that's kind of a shallow answer. But again, the answer that comes from Job has a lot of answers in it, just on principle in that story. The one that comes from Job is, sometimes you don't know if you're actually righteous unless your mettle is tested. So what happens if homosexuality is everyone and everywhere, and everybody follows their sexual urges and just listens to that without temperament? What happens then? Well, carnality, that's like the book of Judges. Everyone does what's right in their own eyes. There's no set structure because we don't feel like following the structure. So my answer to him was all of that a couple times. But it wasn't just that. It was a little easier too. Like, God doesn't hate them, but he does not tolerate deviation from the plan he set for us. With Christ, we get forgiveness from that. But the idea is when you start following Christ, you should start peeling off the layers that are holding you back. Here's the frustrating part of that conversation. I had to give this answer to him 3 times. And it was just an excuse, to be honest. Because he really, like, he forgot my answer all the time. So I'm like, I'm not telling you again, man. I mean, I don't think that's your issue. I just think you don't want to change. And that's okay, but using that as an excuse is, I mean, if you just don't want to change, you at least admit it. And then reflect on that, because that's pretty serious. So that was one question. The other one was, oh, this was actually really heavy. No one can really know, so we make heaven or hell here ourselves. Oh man, talk about a pure agnostic response. Now this person, very sociopathic mentality. They live for themselves, and they are right. Who can really know anything? What is, and this is actually one of the first conversations we had. He was very assertive on what he thought he knew. There we go, something like that. We were talking politics a little bit shortly after Trump was part of getting that Middle East Accord signed. I'm not sure about the details, but that's what happened there. So we got that signed, and we're talking about that's pretty interesting. It's pretty awesome. We're talking about this at work. And he's like, they all believe in the same thing anyway. We're like, what? He's like, yeah, they all believe, the Jews, Muslims, they all believe in the same thing. No, not at all. And to me, in the back of my mind, I'm like, this is somebody who has not studied, who's making these very bold proclamations. But you got to be careful with that, right? You can't just you can't just like devastate somebody. I teach martial arts. If a white belt comes to me and wants to learn, and we spar for the first time, and I lay him out and expect him to come back the next day, like, that's probably not going to happen. You're right. The idea is that you teach, so I have to keep that in perspective. I've obviously read more than him. Let's hear what he has to say. And then he's like, all I know is religion is the biggest lie that's ever been told. And we're like, that, and I'm like, that's not true. How do you find truth? And he asked me a question, because I had to ask him that a couple times. How do you find truth? He said, what is truth? And then he walked away. So, I mean, that's really reflected in the scriptures with Pilate. What is truth? He asks to Christ, and then walks to the masses because he wants to appease a mob. That's what happened there. The proper answer to this question, no one can really know. Because I talked with him personally a little bit after that. No one can really know. Well, how do you find truth? Because that is the answer to that. Can you know anything? Well, if you want to get technical, no. But if you live your life like that, that's relativism in its purest sense. You will go insane. You know right from wrong. You know gravity exists. And how do you know these things? Well, you use your best evidence to find out what's up. That right there is exactly the lead up to the cross. You, me, everybody knows we have messed up at some point. Even though we have great intentions in the long run, we still falter maybe in the short. And then because we falter in the short, the long run's affected. You know, we say it an off comment we didn't mean to. We eat a little bit more food than we didn't mean to. But we did, because we listened to the tyranny of the immediate. And what's heaven and hell on earth? What does that look like? Every time utopianism tries to come in, communism, socialism, well, they kind of run roughshod all over humanity. Making hell on earth, well, that's pretty easy. Everybody kind of knows what that is. Basically trying to make heaven on earth, if you want to get down to it. That second person, it's very difficult to talk to him. He is just not open. And that's what happens when you think you've reached a point of, like, I know everything. You're unteachable. You're also not learning anymore. You basically stamped yourself like, I'm dying right here. This is all I know. I already know everything. You can't tell me anything regardless of what you know. And then what are you supposed to do? Just shrug your shoulders. This is like in the movie The Devil's Advocate, when the son of the devil was arguing with the devil himself, saying, how dare you put me in this situation? He's like, well, you could have not won those cases. You could have not fought so hard for what you knew was wrong. And he's like, but that's what I do. I win. I mean, that movie is extremely powerful. You should definitely watch that movie. It is worth a watch. Keanu Reeves probably best movies in my opinion, next to Constantine, maybe. But anyway, I think I'll do it for this one. Just 2 quick questions. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave a comment below. Subscribe to see more in the future. And I'll see you next time. Take care.